It was a late afternoon, and the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the empty road. The quiet hum of distant cars was the only sound that filled the air, broken only by the occasional chirp of birds in the trees lining the roadside. The wind was cool, rustling through the leaves and brushing against the warm pavement. As the day slowly gave way to evening, the road, normally a busy one, was eerily empty now, as though it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Along the edge of this desolate stretch of road, a small fox lay curled up on the dirt, its small body covered in dust, its fur matted with dirt and blood. Felix, the young fox, had been abandoned there, left to suffer alone. His right leg was clearly broken, twisted in an unnatural angle. His breathing was shallow, a faint whimper escaping his mouth as he lay helpless, unable to move. The pain from his injury was unbearable, and every time he tried to shift, the agony flared up again, making him whimper in desperation. Felix had been running for his life. He had narrowly escaped the clutches of a hunter. But in his frantic flight through the underbrush, he had stepped into a trap, his leg caught by a snare and twisted in the ensuing struggle. He had managed to break free, but the pain had left him vulnerable and weak. Now, lying helpless on the side of the road, he had only one desire: survival. His eyes flickered weakly toward the people walking or driving past, hoping, praying, that someone would notice his suffering. But no one did. Cars sped by, their drivers oblivious to the life in pain at the side of the road. Pedestrians, engrossed in their own lives, walked by without a second glance. Felix could do nothing but lift his head slightly, his eyes filled with silent pleading. He didn't know how long he had been lying there, watching the world pass him by. The pain in his leg was almost unbearable, but his spirit was more broken than his body. The feeling of abandonment, of being ignored, of being unseen, it weighed heavily on him. And he wondered if anyone would ever stop. But with each passing moment, the world around him seemed to grow colder, more indifferent. Lily had just finished her shift at the small local cafe. She was tired, her feet sore from standing all day. But there was something peaceful about the walk home. The evening air was cool, and the sky was painted with hues of pink and orange, signaling the end of another day. Lily's mind was filled with thoughts of home, a warm meal, and the comfort of her bed. The last thing she expected was to encounter something that would change the course of her evening, and perhaps the rest of her life. As she walked down the quiet road, her steps slowed as she saw something lying by the side of the road. At first, she thought it was just a bundle of leaves or trash discarded by the wind. But then she saw the faint movement, the small form barely visible in the fading light. Her heart skipped a beat, and she quickly moved closer, her curiosity and concern growing. What she saw made her stop in her tracks. Lying on the dirt was a young fox, its body fragile and trembling. The fox's fur was matted with dirt and blood, and its right leg was bent in a way that made Lily's stomach churn. She could see the pain in the animal's eyes, the desperation, the hopelessness. Felix's small body trembled. and his once bright eyes were dimmed by exhaustion and injury. It was clear that he had been through something horrible. And yet he was still trying to lift his head. Still trying to survive. Lily's heart twisted in her chest. She had always had a soft spot for animals. And the sight of this poor creature suffering was more than she could bear. Without thinking, she knelt down beside the fox. Her hands trembling as she reached out to him. His fur was warm, though sticky with blood and grime. She could feel the sharpness of his injury. And her heart broke for him even more. She could see that he was in excruciating pain. But his eyes, those eyes filled with quiet pleading, told her everything she needed to know. He was asking for help. And she couldn't walk away. "Hey there, little one," Lily whispered softly, her voice full of tenderness. "I won't leave you." She hesitated for a moment, trying to figure out the best way to help him. Her mind raced, but all she knew was that she couldn't leave him like this. Not when he was so vulnerable. So helpless. Lily looked around, but no one seemed to be paying attention. People were passing by, some glancing at her with confusion, others too busy to care. The feeling of helplessness that Felix had known for so long now seemed to pass on to Lily. She felt the weight of the situation, how alone they both were in that moment. A pang of frustration rose within her as she saw the indifference of the world around her. How could they just walk by? How could they not see the suffering right in front of them? How could no one stop? Lily gently reached out to the fox, cradling his head in her lap. Felix's eyes fluttered as he looked up at her, the pain still evident in his gaze. She could tell he was too weak to move, too hurt to react in any way that could help him. His small body trembled, and Lily instinctively stroked his fur, trying to comfort him as best as she could. "I'm going to help you," she said, her voice soft but determined. "Just hold on, okay?" But as she said this, a small crowd of people had gathered a little distance away. They stood with expressions ranging from curiosity to amusement. Some whispering to each other. Others simply watching. None of them moved forward to offer assistance. And it felt as though they were more interested in observing the situation than helping. Lily could feel their eyes on her, the weight of their judgment in the air. And for a moment, she felt herself faltering, but then Felix whimpered, his eyes blinking slowly, his pain cutting through her hesitation. Lily's heart surged. She couldn't let fear or the discomfort of others stop her. This was a moment to act, not stand still. She didn't care what the people watching thought. Determined, Lily gently lifted the injured fox, supporting his fragile body in her arms. She whispered comforting words to him as she carefully carried him away from the road. The pain in Felix's eyes tugged at her heart. But she pushed forward, determined to get him help. She knew she couldn't leave him to die alone on the side of the road, not when he had been asking for help in the only way he knew how. As Lily carefully made her way home, her steps were slower than usual. The weight of Felix in her arms was both a burden and a source of purpose. She had always been someone who loved animals, who believed in the beauty of life and the importance of kindness. But now, as she walked through the empty street with a fox cradled in her arms, she felt the true meaning of that kindness. In her heart, she knew she was doing the right thing. Felix was in desperate need of help, and she was the one who had the power to make a difference in his life. As she carried him, she felt a deep connection to him, a sense of responsibility that came with knowing that sometimes you could be the one to save another creature from suffering. And as she reached her doorstep, Felix's body relaxed in her arms, no longer trembling. His breathing steadied, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he felt the comfort of safety. Lily gently laid him down in a soft bed by the fireplace, her heart swelling with compassion. She knew the road ahead would be difficult. Felix would need care, healing, and time to recover, but for the first time in a long while, he had found someone who would not turn away, someone who would see his pain and do everything in her power to ease it. And as she looked down at the little fox, the bond between them formed in that moment. Unspoken but strong. It was a bond born from shared vulnerability, from one soul seeing the pain of another and deciding not to ignore it. It was a bond that would carry them both through the challenges ahead. In the quiet of that evening, as the world outside continued to turn, Lily whispered softly to Felix, "You're safe now. You don't have to be alone anymore." And Felix, with his broken leg and his weary heart, closed his eyes for the first time in what felt like forever. Knowing that he wasn't alone anymore either, Lily stood there for a moment, her heart heavy with empathy as she looked down at the fragile fox lying on the roadside. Felix's once vibrant eyes were now dull with pain, his small body trembling in the dirt. The sight of him, helpless and suffering, stirred something deep within her. It was an unbearable feeling to see an innocent creature in such a state. And she couldn't just walk away. Her mind raced as she quickly made the decision. She would help him. There was no other choice. The world could keep moving on. But she wasn't about to let this fox die alone on the side of the road. Her hands trembled with urgency as she crouched down, ready to lift him into her arms. Felix let out a soft whimper, as though he knew he was being saved. But as she bent over, about to lift him, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "You're really going to take that thing with you?" a man's voice said, sharp with disbelief. Lily's head snapped up, startled. Standing just a few feet away, a small group of people had gathered. They were watching her with a mixture of curiosity and judgment. The man who spoke had his arms crossed, his expression skeptical. Another woman stood beside him, shaking her head, her face scrunched in disapproval. Lily's heart skipped a beat, but she forced herself to ignore the tightness in her chest. She had already made up her mind. Felix needed help, and she was going to be the one to provide it. "Why would you even bother with a wild animal?" the woman asked, her tone laced with judgment. "You know that thing could be sick, right? It could be carrying all kinds of diseases. Are you really going to risk your health for a wild fox?" Lily could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, the sting of their words sinking in. They didn't understand. They didn't see what she saw, an animal in pain, a life worth saving. To them, Felix was just another wild creature. Something to ignore, something to fear, something that didn't deserve care. "Yeah, what if it attacks you or something?" another man chimed in. his voice dripping with skepticism. "That thing's not even domesticated. It's dangerous." Lily's heart pounded in her chest as she stood up. Felix still cradled in her arms. The eyes of the onlookers felt like daggers, each glance weighing her down. The murmurs continued, whispers that only added to the growing unease inside her. But the louder they grew, the more determined she became. She couldn't let their words sway her. Felix needed help, and she would be the one to give it to him. "Why do you care so much about it?" another person asked. This time an older man. His voice laced with confusion. "There are so many other problems in the world. Why stop to help a wild animal?" Lily took a deep breath, gathering her strength. She couldn't explain it all, couldn't justify every reason why this moment mattered to her. The world might not understand, but she did. Felix wasn't just a wild animal. He was a living being in need. And that was enough for her. In that moment, she realized something. She didn't need anyone else's approval. She didn't need him to understand. What mattered was what she knew in her heart. Lily didn't answer them. Instead, she looked down at Felix, her eyes softening. His breathing was shallow, but he seemed to trust her. His tired eyes locked onto hers. His small body lay against her chest, seeking comfort in the warmth of her embrace. In that moment, she realized that no matter what the world said, she couldn't turn her back on him. He needed her, and she wasn't about to let him down. With a final glance at the onlookers, Lily stepped forward, her steps slow but steady. She walked past them, feeling their eyes still following her every move, their judgment thick in the air. But their words didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the life she was carrying in her arms, the fragile creature that needed her. The weight of Felix in her arms was both a comfort and a reminder of the urgency of the situation. She quickened her pace, heading toward the nearest veterinary clinic. She had lived in the small town her entire life, and she knew the way. It wasn't far, but with each step, the judgment from the crowd seemed to cling to her, like a dark cloud. She couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was watching, waiting for her to make a mistake, to change her mind. But she didn't, she wouldn't. As Lily walked, she kept her focus on the road ahead. She couldn't let the judgmental eyes or whispered comments derail her. The clinic was just around the corner, and Felix needed medical attention now. Her mind raced as she thought about the possible injuries he had. His leg was clearly broken, and there was a chance he might have internal injuries from the struggle he had gone through. He had been through so much already. He couldn't go without help any longer. She could feel Felix's weight growing heavier. But it wasn't because he was too large. It was the emotional weight that seemed to press down on her. A pressure she had never felt so acutely before. She had made her decision, but the looks of the people around her were still fresh in her mind. They didn't get it. They didn't understand why she was doing this. But then, in the quiet of the streets, as the cool air of the evening wrapped around them, Lily thought of something else. She thought of how many people walked by without ever stopping. How many times people turned away when something wasn't convenient for them. But she wasn't like that. She wasn't going to let Felix down. When Lily finally arrived at the veterinary clinic, she rushed inside. her breath quick and uneven. The clinic was small but well kept, with bright lights and the soft hum of activity in the background. The receptionist, a kind woman who had seen Lily walk by countless times, looked up from her desk in surprise. "Lily, what happened?" the receptionist asked, her voice filled with concern. Lily gently laid Felix on the counter, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted his fragile body. "I found him on the side of the road," Lily explained quickly. "He's been hurt. His leg is broken, and I'm not sure about the rest. But I think he needs help now." The receptionist's eyes softened as she looked at the injured fox. "You did the right thing, Lily," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "Let's get him taken care of." As the vet and nurses rushed into action, Lily stepped back, a wave of exhaustion washing over her. She had done it. She had ignored the judgment, the whispers, the doubt, and had taken the first step towards saving this life. And now, she could only wait. She sat in the waiting room, her hands still shaking, her mind replaying the looks of judgment she had received from the crowd. But as she thought about Felix, about his silent plea for help, she realized that none of it mattered. What mattered was that she had acted out of kindness, out of compassion, and that she had chosen to do something, even when it wasn't easy. The vet eventually came out with good news. Felix would be all right. His leg was indeed broken, but it could be treated. He was weak and exhausted, but with care, he would heal. Lily's heart soared with relief as she realized that her decision, despite the doubt from others, had been the right one. She had saved a life. Lily took a deep breath and smiled to herself. The world might never fully understand why she did what she did. But she knew, and that was enough. Felix wasn't just a wild animal to her. He was a living being who needed help. And she had chosen to provide it. And that, she realized, was the only thing that mattered in the end. Lily's heart was racing as she walked into the veterinary clinic, her arms still cradling Felix carefully. The weight of the fox in her arms had grown more intense with each passing step. But the urgency in her heart drove her forward. She had made the decision. She would save him, no matter what. Felix needed help, and she was going to make sure he got it. When she stepped inside the small but cozy clinic, the receptionist immediately looked up with surprise. "Lily, what happened? Is everything okay?" she asked, her tone filled with concern. Lily shook her head, her breath quickening as she gently laid Felix down on the counter. His fragile body trembled, his fur matted with blood, and his broken leg clearly in need of immediate care. "I found him on the side of the road," Lily said breathlessly. "He's hurt badly, his leg is broken, and I think there's an infection. He needs help now." The receptionist's face softened, and she nodded quickly. "I'll call the vet right now. Please, take a seat. We'll get him sorted out." Lily barely heard her as she sank into a chair nearby, her gaze fixed on Felix. His small, weak body lay motionless, his breathing shallow, but there was still a flicker of life in his eyes. She couldn't help but wonder about his past. What had happened to him? Why had no one helped sooner? The vet, a kind woman named Dr. Parker, quickly arrived and moved to Felix's side. Kneeling down to assess him, she looked up at Lily with a concerned expression as she gently examined the fox. Her experienced hands moved carefully, her eyes scanning Felix's injuries. "This little guy has been through a lot," Dr. Parker said softly, her tone filled with sympathy. "His leg is broken. Pretty badly, I might add. And there's an infection setting in. Likely from the wound on his leg. If we don't treat this quickly, he could lose the use of that leg. Or worse, the infection could spread and become fatal." Lily's heart sank as she heard the words. She had known Felix was in pain, but she hadn't realized how serious his condition really was. She reached down and gently ran her fingers through his fur, her voice shaking as she spoke. "You'll help him, right? You'll make him better?" Dr. Parker gave her a soft, reassuring smile. "We can help him, Lily, but he'll need treatment, and it'll take some time. It's going to be a few weeks before he's strong enough to move around again. And he's going to need constant care." Lily nodded without hesitation. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice firm with determination. "I'll pay for the treatment. Just make him better." Dr. Parker gave a nod of approval. "You're doing the right thing. But it's not just the medical care he needs. He'll need a calm, safe environment to heal. That's where you come in." Lily's mind was already made up. She didn't even need to think twice. "I'll take him home with me," she said without a second thought. "I'll make sure he's comfortable and well taken care of." As Dr. Parker started preparing the necessary medical supplies, Lily stepped back and let the reality of what was happening sink in. She had made the decision to help this little creature, and she wasn't going to let anything or anyone stop her. She had already ignored the judgmental stares of strangers, and now there was no turning back. The vet continued to work, carefully cleaning Felix's wounds and stabilizing his broken leg. As the fox was sedated, the medical team set to work stitching the wound and resetting his leg. Lily could only watch, her heart aching for the fox as he lay unconscious, relying on her to help him recover. She couldn't imagine how long Felix had been suffering, alone and in pain, but now, with the right care, he had a chance at survival. After what seemed like hours, Dr. Parker finished the treatment and looked up at Lily. "He's stable for now," she said, her voice kind but practical. "We'll need to keep him here for a couple of days for observation. But after that, you can take him home. He'll need rest, food, and regular medication. It's going to be a long road to recovery, but I think he'll make it." Lily smiled with relief, but her eyes were still full of worry. "Thank you. I'll do whatever it takes to help him. I'll be here every day if I need to." Dr. Parker smiled. "That's exactly what he needs. A safe place. Someone who cares. You're doing a good thing, Lily." As Lily left the clinic that evening, she felt a weight lift off her chest. Felix had been given a chance. But now, the hard part was just beginning. The journey of caring for him, of helping him heal, was only just starting. She wasn't sure how long it would take or how difficult it would be. But she knew she was ready to face whatever came her way. For the next several days, Lily stayed by Felix's side as he recovered. She brought him home from the clinic and made a comfortable spot for him by the fireplace, where he could rest and heal in peace. Her small apartment, usually quiet and empty after a long day at work, now felt like a sanctuary for the injured fox. Lily made sure he had everything he needed: food, fresh water, medicine, and most importantly, her constant presence. At first, Felix was disoriented, his body weak from the injury and the sedation. He didn't understand where he was or why everything was so different. But Lily was patient, speaking to him in a calm, soothing voice, letting him get used to his new environment at his own pace. She knew it would take time for him to trust her fully. But she was prepared for that. Slowly, Felix began to respond. His eyes, once filled with fear and pain, began to soften as he realized that he was safe. He would still flinch when she reached out to him, and his body would tremble when she had to give him medicine or help him adjust his leg. But over time, he grew accustomed to her touch. His small form, once stiff with fear, began to relax, and he would even nuzzle into her hands as she carefully tended to his wounds. Every day, Lily would spend hours with him. She would sit by his side, reading or working on her computer, just so he could get used to her presence. She would speak softly to him, telling him everything would be all right. Felix, in return, would watch her with growing interest, his eyes brightening when he saw her approach. As the days turned into weeks, Felix's condition slowly improved. His leg, though still fragile, was healing, and the infection began to subside. He started to eat with more enthusiasm, his small body gaining strength with every meal. Lily was encouraged by his progress, and each little sign of improvement made her feel that the effort had been worth it. One day, as she sat beside him, she felt a soft nudge against her hand. Surprised, she looked down, and for the first time, Felix wasn't trembling. His eyes, though still wary, had softened, and his small tail gave a tentative wag. Lily's heart swelled with joy. "You're getting better," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You're going to be okay." Felix, despite the past trauma, was starting to trust again. His movements were no longer as frantic or fearful. When Lily offered him food or medicine, he no longer shrank away. He was learning that she wasn't a threat, that she was the one who would help him. The one who had kept her promise to him. Weeks passed, and Felix's progress continued. His leg healed, and his strength returned. He was still cautious at times, but the fear that once gripped him was now replaced by something else: trust. He would follow Lily around the apartment, his small paws padding softly on the floor. And sometimes, when she sat still, he would curl up beside her, resting his head on her lap as if he had finally found a safe place to belong. Lily watched him grow stronger each day, and with every passing moment, she felt an even deeper bond forming between them. It wasn't just about saving a life, it was about the quiet understanding that had developed between them. Felix was no longer just a wounded fox she had found on the side of the road. He had become a part of her life, a living, breathing creature she had promised to help. And now, as he healed, he had become something more, a reminder of the power of compassion, of the importance of caring for another. Even when the world may not understand, Lily had kept her promise. Felix was healing, not just physically, but emotionally as well, and in the process, Lily had learned something too, that the bond between humans and animals was something extraordinary, something that transcended understanding and judgment. Felix had taught her that sometimes the greatest act of kindness is simply being there, without expectation, without judgment, just offering help when it's needed most. And as she looked at Felix, now strong and full of life once more, she couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. In saving him, she had found something in herself too, something that would stay with her forever. The first few days after bringing Felix home had been filled with uncertainty. The fox was fragile, barely able to move, and the weight of responsibility weighed heavily on Lily's shoulders. She was determined to help him recover, but there were moments when it felt like a daunting task. Felix's broken leg had required immediate attention, and his infection had been serious enough to keep him in pain and immobile. But over time, with every dose of medication and every gentle touch from Lily, Felix slowly began to improve. It wasn't a quick recovery, but it was steady. Each day, Lily would sit by his side, watching him with concern, but also with hope. She had created a comfortable corner by the fireplace for him, a quiet space where he could rest and feel safe. She would often place a soft blanket beneath him and let him sleep as long as he needed. At first, Felix had been hesitant to move, his body stiff from the pain and fear that had accompanied his injury. But as the days passed, he began to show small signs of progress. His appetite returned first. Felix had been too weak to eat much when he first arrived. But gradually, he started to show interest in the food Lily offered. She made sure to provide him with a variety of meats and treats to help him regain his strength. Felix would nibble cautiously at first, still unsure of his new surroundings. But with each meal, he seemed more eager, more trusting. Soon, his energy began to return as well. The broken leg, though still fragile, was healing well under Lily's careful care. His movements, though still a bit slow and hesitant, became more fluid, and he began to explore the small apartment more freely. His once dull eyes began to sparkle again, no longer clouded by pain or fear, but instead filled with curiosity and cautious optimism. One afternoon, Lily sat on the floor with a book, her back against the couch. Felix, who had been resting nearby, suddenly stood up and stretched, his little body arching as he tested his legs. He took a few tentative steps toward her, his movement awkward but determined. He sniffed at her hands, then cautiously nudged her arm with his head. Lily smiled, her heart swelling with joy. She reached out and gently scratched behind his ears. Felix leaned into her touch, closing his eyes in contentment. It was a small gesture, but to Lily, it felt monumental. It was the first time he had approached her without hesitation, without fear. In that moment, she knew that Felix was beginning to trust her, to understand that he was safe in her care. As the days turned into weeks, Felix continued to grow stronger. His broken leg, though still in a splint, showed signs of healing. The infection had subsided, and his coat began to regain some of its former shine. He still had moments of shyness, times when he would retreat into his quiet corner to rest. But those moments were becoming fewer and farther between. Felix had transformed from a fragile, wounded animal into a playful, curious fox who was beginning to feel at home. One evening, as Lily sat on the couch, Felix walked up to her and sat down beside her. She looked down in surprise as he nudged her hand with his nose, a soft whimper escaping him. His eyes, once filled with pain and fear, were now full of affection, and Lily could see the bond between them growing stronger. She gently stroked his fur, marveling at how far he had come. "You're doing so well, Felix," she said softly, her voice filled with pride. "I knew you had it in you." And then, in an unexpected moment, Felix did something Lily had never expected. He let out a soft, almost laugh-like sound, a small chirp of joy, a noise that seemed to surprise both of them. Felix's mouth curled into a small, almost mischievous smile, and Lily laughed in response, her heart light with happiness. It was the first time she had ever heard Felix make such a sound. He had been through so much. And yet, here he was, showing a side of himself that was playful and full of life. It was a rare expression for a fox, and one that Lily knew she would treasure forever. As the weeks went by, Felix's personality began to emerge more clearly. He became more curious about the world around him, exploring the apartment with a newfound sense of freedom. He would dart across the room, chasing after small toys that Lily had bought for him, or pouncing playfully at the shadows on the wall. His movements were no longer stiff or hesitant, but graceful and fluid, a sign of how far he had come from the injured, trembling fox that had first entered her home. Lily found herself laughing more often now, watching Felix's antics with amusement and joy. He had become not just a patient in need of care, but a companion. She had never imagined that caring for a wild animal could create such a deep and unexpected bond. But Felix had become a friend. She had grown attached to him, and the thought of him ever leaving her side seemed impossible. There were moments when Felix would come up to her, his tail flicking with excitement, and curl up in her lap, seeking affection. He would nuzzle against her chest, his small body warm and comforting against her. In those quiet moments, when the world outside seemed far away, Lily would realize just how special their connection was. Felix had become more than just a fox she had saved. He had become her companion, her friend, and her joy. One day, as Felix sat by the window, watching the world outside, Lily sat beside him, running her fingers through his fur. She had never expected to feel this way, to form such a deep bond with a creature so different from herself. But as she looked down at him, watching his eyes brighten as he looked out at the world, she knew that they had both been through something together. Felix wasn't just a wild animal anymore. He was a survivor, just like her, and they had both found something in each other. He had found safety and trust, and she had found an unexpected friend. "You're strong, Felix," she said softly, her voice full of affection. "You've come so far. I'm proud of you." Felix turned his head to look at her, his eyes soft and trusting. And in that moment, Lily knew that their bond was unbreakable. What had started as a simple act of kindness had turned into something far greater, a friendship that transcended species. A connection forged through trust, care, and love. As the months passed and Felix's recovery continued, he became more and more like the playful, energetic fox Lily had always hoped he would be. He had transformed into a confident, joyful animal, no longer afraid of the world around him. The once fragile fox had become a strong and happy companion, full of life and curiosity. And Lily, in turn, had become a better person because of him. In the quiet moments they shared together, Lily would think about the journey they had been on. She had helped Felix heal. But in doing so, he had helped her in ways she couldn't have anticipated. He had reminded her of the power of kindness, of the importance of giving without expecting anything in return, and of the deep connection that could form between two living beings, no matter how different they might be. And so, as they sat together in the warm glow of the evening, Felix curled up contentedly beside her. Lily felt a deep sense of peace. She had kept her promise to help him. And in the process, they had both found something beautiful, a friendship that was built on love, trust, and the healing power of care. Felix, once a broken, frightened animal, had become a symbol of resilience, joy, and the unexpected connections that life sometimes brings. And Lily, who had started as a stranger to him, had become his family. Together, they had created something special, a bond that would last a lifetime. The days had passed quickly, and as Felix's recovery continued, so did the bond between him and Lily. The fox, once so frail and fearful, had blossomed into a healthy, vibrant creature, full of life and energy. He was no longer the injured animal Lily had found on the roadside. Now, Felix was a symbol of resilience, joy, and the healing power of kindness. He had regained his strength, his confidence, and his place in the world. But as the days grew warmer and the nights shorter, something changed in Felix. Lily had noticed it in the way he moved, in the way his eyes seemed to hold a deeper sense of longing, something that called to him from beyond the windows of the apartment. It wasn't fear or anxiety, it was something more primal. His instincts, his wild nature, were starting to awaken. One morning, as Lily opened the window to let in the fresh spring air, she noticed Felix staring out at the trees with a gaze that seemed different from any she had seen before. His body was still, and his nose twitched as if he could smell something calling to him from the distance. His ears were perked up, and there was an intensity in his eyes that Lily had never seen before. He stood by the window, his tail flicking with an energy she hadn't noticed in him for weeks. He was no longer content to curl up beside her in the evenings. He would still nuzzle into her lap occasionally. But now, there was something more. The call of the wild was drawing him, pulling him toward the freedom of the forest where he had once lived. Lily watched him quietly for a long moment, her heart heavy with the realization that the time had come. Felix had been with her for so long now, and in many ways, They had become inseparable. She had cared for him when he was weak. And in return, he had become her companion, her friend. But Felix had never truly belonged to her. He belonged to the wild, to the forest, to the life he was meant to lead. Lily knew that the day would come when Felix would want to return to that life. And as much as it pained her to think about it, she also knew that it was time for him to go. The moment arrived one afternoon when Felix walked to the door. His movements slow but deliberate. He paused at the threshold, looking back at Lily, his eyes filled with an emotion she couldn't quite place. There was no fear in his gaze, only a quiet understanding, as if he knew that this was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Lily stood still, her heart aching as she watched him. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Felix turned his head, and for a moment, it seemed as if he was deciding something. Then, with a soft whimper, he walked over to Lily. He nudged her hand gently with his nose, then pressed his head into her palm, his fur warm and soft beneath her touch. It was a simple gesture, but it was full of meaning. He was saying goodbye in the only way he knew how. "Thank you," he seemed to be saying, "for everything." Lily's eyes filled with tears as she gently stroked his fur, her hand trembling. "You're free now, Felix," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Go and live the life you were always meant to have." Felix stayed there for a moment longer, his body close to hers, as if soaking in the warmth of her presence one last time. Then, with a final look, he turned and padded toward the door, his steps soft but resolute. Lily watched as Felix slipped outside and into the wild world beyond her door. Her heart ached as she saw him disappear into the trees, his small form blending with the shadows of the forest. The door closed softly behind him, and for a moment, everything felt still. There was a quiet emptiness in her heart, but also a sense of peace. She had helped him, loved him, and now, she had set him free. As the days passed, Lily found herself walking through the apartment in a daze, her mind replaying the moments she had shared with Felix. She missed him terribly, but she knew that letting him go was the right thing to do. Felix had found his way back to the life he was meant to lead, and she could never hold him back from that. Still, the apartment felt quieter without him, and the small, familiar sounds of his movements, the soft patter of his paws across the floor, the gentle rustle of his fur, were now just a memory. Weeks went by, and though the quietness of the apartment lingered, Lily carried on with her life. She found comfort in the memories of the times she had shared with Felix, and though there was a pang of sadness when she thought of him, there was also a sense of joy in knowing that he was out there, living the life he deserved. Then, one evening, as the sun set and the sky turned a dusky shade of purple, Lily was sitting by the window, staring out into the vast expanse of the forest that lay beyond the city. She thought she saw a flicker of movement in the trees, but when she blinked, it was gone. She shook her head, thinking it was just her imagination, and turned back to her book. But just as she did, she heard a soft scratching at the door. Her heart skipped a beat. She stood up quickly, her hands trembling. Could it be? Could it possibly be him? Lily hurried to the door, her breath catching in her throat. She opened it slowly, and there, standing on the threshold, was Felix. He was no longer the frightened, broken fox she had found weeks ago. His fur was shiny and thick, and he stood tall, his movements confident and graceful. But he wasn't alone. Beside him was a smaller, equally vibrant fox, its eyes bright and curious. Felix's companion stood close to him, as if seeking comfort in his presence. Felix looked up at Lily, his eyes gleaming with something she couldn't quite describe. Perhaps a touch of pride, of joy. Lily's heart swelled as she looked at them both. She smiled, her eyes watering with happiness. "Felix," she whispered, stepping forward, "you came back." Felix stepped forward, his companion following closely behind. He nuzzled against Lily's hand, just as he had done before, and she stroked his fur gently. Then, as if to introduce his new friend, he nudged the smaller fox toward her. Lily smiled, her heart full. "You found someone, haven't you?" Felix's tail wagged slightly, and the new fox seemed to sniff at Lily's hand. But it was clear that the two foxes had become a pair, partners in life. Partners in the wild. Felix had found his place. But he still remembered her, the one who had cared for him when he was in need. For a few moments, they stood together, Felix and his companion, and Lily. She felt a wave of peace settle over her. They were free now, but they still came back to her, as if to say thank you. And in that small, beautiful gesture, Lily realized that she had given him something invaluable, her love, her kindness, and a safe place to heal. "Come back anytime," she said softly, smiling at Felix and his companion. "You're always welcome here." As the two foxes turned and disappeared into the forest once more, Lily stood at the door, watching them go. She knew they would be fine, that Felix had found his new family. But she also knew that their bond, the one they had forged through trust and care, would never fade. They might come and go, but their connection would always remain, as strong as it ever was. And so, as the night settled in, Lily closed the door softly, a quiet smile on her lips. She had said goodbye, but it wasn't really goodbye at all. It was just another chapter in their story, one of friendship, love, and the deep, unbreakable bond between them. Felix had gone back to the wild, but he would always carry a piece of her with him, just as she would carry a piece of him in her heart forever.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.